March of 2021 is almost here. Can you believe it? Man, time flies. Well, we got some video game releases for you this month. Although it's certainly not the biggest month for game releases, there are still a couple of titles worth note. So we've got 10 games releasing in March of 2021. Let's just get started off with number 10 and talk about Balan Wonderworld. Balan Wonderworld, Balan Wonderland, however, I've been mispronouncing it, but essentially, this is a Square Enix joint developed by Japanese developers, most notably director Yuji Naka and art director Naoto Oshima. Now, this duo is famous for working together on Nights into Dreams and Sonic Adventure. So these are like two 90s developer game dev heroes. I mean, depending on how you feel about those games, but still, it's an interesting pairing to be coming back. And with this game, although admittedly it seems like it's geared a little bit more towards children, it seems creative and fun. Essentially, it's a 3D action platforming game where you play as one of two people thrust into this magical musical world led by this conductor type of guy known as Balan. The game is level-based and there's some action and platforming and a focus on costumes. Your player can wear up to 3 costumes at once, but there's a bunch of them in the game, over 80 collectible costumes, and all of these costumes will give you different abilities and kind of shake up the gameplay. Now, there was a demo available for this title. Opinions are kind of all over the place on this game, but it seems like if you're into the aesthetic, the vibe, the wholesomeness, then hey, maybe it's for you. It's releasing on March 26th, 2021 for PC, Switch, PlayStation, and Xbox. Next, over at number 9, we have Yakuza Like a Dragon. Yes, believe it or not, this is releasing finally for PlayStation 5. This is about 4 months after its main debut release on Xbox Series X and S. For the next generation consoles, Xbox had a brief window of exclusivity, so now if you've been sitting around, if you were one of the very few people lucky enough to get a PlayStation 5, and you've been sitting around wanting to play a shiny new Yakuza game on it, now's your chance, and it's probably worth the wait because Yakuza Like a Dragon is a good-ass Yakuza game. It is admittedly different, the gameplay flow changes with the RPG and turn-based elements, but still, you're in a fun-filled, densely packed world with hilarious creativity and weird over-the-top moments, and also just a bunch of great character moments and some real good drama. We've advocated for these games for a long time. They walk a really fine line between interesting storytelling and just absurdity with some fun gameplay, so we can't recommend it enough, as well as every other game in the series. One thing to note, if you have PS4 save files for the game, it won't transfer over to the PlayStation 5 version, so make sure you remember that before jumping in. Still, you won't have to wait long in March to play Yakuza on your PS5. It's releasing on March 2nd. Next, over at number 8, we have Monster Jam Steel Titans 2. This is an over-the-top monster truck action game, and it looks absolutely ridiculous, and I think we need that sometimes. These games do a really good job of taking the real-world trucks, most notably this one is going to have more than ever before, but it takes those real-world trucks and puts them in ridiculous, dumb situations and levels and types of races that you'd want to see monster trucks compete in. There are now 38 trucks and 12 real-world stadiums, as well as 5 newer, larger, and kind of wackier worlds. Plus, this time around, there's new online multiplayer modes, so you can go driving around and jumping and crashing and racing with your friends. If you're just looking for some fun and some levity in your life, turn off your brain. Monster Jam Steel Titans 2 looks like it has it, especially with some of the worlds. Like, there's one world called Camp Crushmore, and it's like a Mount Rushmore outdoor nature type area, but instead of the presidents on the mountain, it's just monster trucks. Hell yeah. Not too much more to say about that. I don't know, man. Either way, this is another early March game. It's releasing on March 2nd, and it's releasing for PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch. Next, over at number 7, we have an interesting one. It's Kina, Bridge of Spirits. Now, this one comes with a big, heavy grain of salt because we still don't know exactly if it's coming in March. We wanted to keep it on this list just to play it safe, just in case it does actually launch, but I want to say maybe stay in the middle here. Don't get your hopes up too much. From that CES presentation a few months back that Sony had, many of you probably know that there was a period where the trailer that they showed, the sizzle reel, had a little thing at the bottom that showed a bunch of dates for upcoming PlayStation games. This was theirs, they put it there, they eventually took it down, but it's legit, and one of the games listed at the time time was Kina Bridge of Spirits, March 2021. That being said, we've seen many games get delayed and pushed, and Ember Lab, the developers here, haven't really said anything. They've been pretty radio silent on when the game is actually coming. We don't want to rush them, of course, but it would be nice to see it in March because the game looked really cool. An incredible art style, kind of a fun action adventure in a fantasy world, focused around you collecting these little critter guys and manipulating the environment and fighting enemies and saving the world. It just seemed cool and just unique enough to really scratch that adventure action itch, you know, with a little bit of like a Disney animated studios or Pixar type of vibe. The game does have a lot of potential. We've seen a lot of people put it on their most anticipated lists. We've even seen the game development community be really interested in the game. We'll be honest, we've made mistakes in the past with lists like these where we don't think a game is going to release during a month when there's a wide open window, and then we put out the video and then suddenly the game gets dated and it releases that month. So this time we're playing it safe. We're including Kina. We don't know for sure, but fingers crossed. Next, over at number 6, we have Ranch Simulator. So in March, between monster truck games and a ranch farm simulator, it's almost like we got a fun little country theme going on here. But the more we looked into Ranch Sim, as they're calling it, the more comprehensive this thing really looks. There's a lot to it. You're building, you're farming, you're hunting, you're running a business, you're taking care of the land, you're driving around, you're selling, you're buying, you're even exploring. There's a lot going on here. Interestingly enough, it's less about just building a farm and more about everything else. I mean, the game itself, the developers, they dubbed it as a single player and multiplayer open world simulator. But it's just an open world simulator where you happen to run a ranch. Still, that doesn't mean that the ranch elements are in the back seat, because what we've seen from gameplay, it seems pretty cool, especially the building. And if you're building with other people, it seems to be even cooler. You got cows, you gotta feed some pigs, you gotta do all that farming stuff. And of course, you have to deal with the elements too. It's all framed loosely around a story of your family having a ranch that has fallen on bad times, and it's up for you to build it back up to its former glory and rise to even more. We're keeping an eye on this, and we're really curious to see just how far it goes, because from its Steam listing and just some early stuff that they've shown off, it seems way more ambitious than we expected, and we hope it lives up to it, especially for people that are just dying to play a very interesting hybrid game like this. Ranch Simulator is releasing on PC via Steam March 4th. Now down to number 5, we have Evil Genius 2 World Domination. This game is interesting because it's being developed by Rebellion, the folks behind the very awesome Sniper Elite games. They've been really creative for a long time, and the original Evil Genius game definitely was really cool, and it seems like they're taking it even further this time around. Essentially, it's like a cool spin on a concept we've seen before. Like, think about how Tropico added like kind of a dictator spin to city building management types of games. Well, Evil Genius goes in the opposite direction, where you're kind of building a lair as a supervillain. Whether it's like a lair in a volcano or a secret underground lab or anything like that, it's up to you to build it, staff it, run it, and essentially take over the world. Now, it's interesting because, of course, with a game like this, you have to worry about training your staff and building up power and making sure it's all running efficiently, but you also have to worry about defending it from the good guys. So you need to have all kinds of safety procedures in place, as well as booby traps and other dangers to really succeed, and it just seems like an awesome game. We know many players that just really like to live out their evil villain fantasies, and this is probably gonna scratch that itch. Let's go back even further. If you're somebody who was into like the Dungeon Keeper games, this is kind of like the next evolution of that. Evil Genius 2 World Domination is releasing on PC March 30th. Down to number 4, we have Overcooked, All You Can Eat. Now, this is interesting and worth pointing out that the game already is on next generation consoles. This release here is releasing on PC, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Switch. Overcooked All You Can Eat is essentially Overcooked 1 and 2 combined into one big package with some extra features and things cleaned up a little bit, load time sped up. And if you've never played an Overcooked game before, which we highly recommend, this package, this full package, is probably worth picking up. Not to mention the fact they're also working to add cross-platform multiplayer to it, and it also has some of the best couch co-op gameplay out there, where if you just want to like hate your mom or yell at your siblings or your best friends and get into fights about who needs to chop the onions faster, who needs to bring over this, who needs to tend to the oven and put out the fire. These games breed that all-out chaos when you're playing together because it's all about cooking efficiently and quickly in the kitchen via teamwork and communication while the game continuously throws more and more complicated elements. It's not just the recipes get more complicated. No, your kitchen and the situations get more complicated, and it's a ton of fun, even if it's a bit stress-inducing. Seriously, like I said, I don't think we can recommend these games enough. If this is your type of thing, if this is your forte, this package is probably going to be a no-brainer. It's releasing on March 23rd. Next, down to number 3, we're going indie with Minute of Islands. To be completely honest, from what we've seen, this one is trickier to explain, but essentially it's like a single-player, linear, narrative adventure that's more focused on storytelling, world building, and some puzzle platforming stuff more than anything. You're not running around killing anything. No, you are this like young magical girl going through this world, using your magical device to essentially resurrect these old beings and save this group of islands. And that's the most interesting part, the way you kind of travel from island to island in the game. Actually reminds me of another recent game called Spiritfarer, although you could tell it's very different. Just the idea of sitting on a vessel and cruising from one area to another and discovering just more beautiful two-dimensional art style stuff. I'm all about that, especially with the emphasis on the story here, with more of like a comic booky, hand-drawn style. Just some of the creature designs, the world designs, the character designs. There's something else, man. The story is fully narrated with voice acting, and it's already won a ton of awards and nominations from the Independent Game Festival, Indie Mega Booth choices at different PAXs and Gamescoms, and really with a cool story, a cool art style, presumably, hopefully, some good music and vibes. This could be a really unique and maybe even relaxing experience. Minute of Islands is releasing on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch March 18th. Now down to number 2, fittingly enough, we have It Takes Two, which is an incredibly cool looking game. I'm just personally in love with this concept because it is from the developers behind A Way Out. Remember that guy who went on the Game Awards and said F the Oscars? Well, he and a team developed a really cool on-the-run convict jail escaping co-op game, and we were blown away by it and totally in love with it. And it seems like this time around at Hazelight, the developers are taking that two-player concept to the next level with this game, It Takes Two, where essentially you are an estranged couple, a husband and wife, who are magically transformed into dolls. So in some kind of weird Honey, I Shrunk the Kids scenario, you are running around this strange new world trying to solve puzzles and survive in some pretty action-packed looking moments, while also maybe saving your relationship in the game, I mean. What is really curious is that the game has been dubbed a romantic comedy, which is cool. We don't really have those in video games. And like A Way Out, they're going even further this time with doubling down on more gameplay mechanics and more variety. So the game and the story is always moving forward, and you're always going to be doing and experiencing something new, because that's how a real adventure should work. But what Hazelight really specializes in is working together and inventing gameplay scenarios that really test your patience with another player, and how you have to work together very much pans out differently than it ever has in other video games. We're really hoping that It Takes Two can live up to the potential and live up to the developers' previous titles, because this could easily be one of the best games of this month and also maybe even this year. I expect this one to be extremely underrated and not talked about enough. I'm just calling that now. But of course, like with many games, we will be making a before you buy video on this game to see if it is actually good when it releases on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox on March 26th. But down to number 1, of course, we have Monster Hunter Rise. Now, I know a lot of people have been clamoring for more Monster Hunter, not to mention new fans that have been introduced to the Monster Hunter series thanks to Monster Hunter World hitting the consoles. But now we're going a bit more back to basics with this game, with Monster Hunter Rise releasing only on Nintendo Switch, which very much reminds me of a lot of the other Monster Hunter games that completely blew up on 3DS. Now, Monster Hunter started on PlayStation 2, but for a lot of people, they found their footing with it on a Nintendo platform, so this just makes sense to us. Developed during the development of Monster Hunter World, apparently the two studios compared notes, and there are a lot of similarities here, but with a lot more over-the-top looking stuff here and some very interesting use of verticality. Monster Hunter games, as you may or may not know, are famously pretty flat, and you very much being on the ground. Monster Hunter World shook this up, but Rise seems to really take it and run with it, and it can make for some really, really cool monster hunting scenarios, especially if you're playing with some other people. I think the potential here is absolutely nuts, and this is going to be a very killer game for the Nintendo Switch. I'm betting on it. Monster Hunter Rise is releasing at the end of the month on Switch, March 26th. Those are 10 games releasing in March worth at least paying attention to, but we got 2 more that we wanted to mention. First, Stubbs the Zombie is finally getting a re-release. It's going to be on PS4, Xbox, Switch, PC, March 16th. Not only that, it is worth mentioning that the Kingdom Hearts series is getting a PC release. All the titles are finally dumping onto PC. So if you've never gotten your hands on these, now seemingly finally is the time. The wait is over. These are the games worth paying attention to March 2021. Like I said, I think it is a bit of a quiet year, but we're very curious to see what games you guys are interested in. Please be sure to let us know in the comments. Any game that caught your eye, if you're planning on picking up even just one of these games, let us know. We tailor our videos around what games you guys are interested in, so we want to hear from you. Of course, also, clicking the like button does help us. If we helped introduce you to a new game, we would really appreciate that like. But also, if you're new, consider subscribing, hitting that notification bell, because we put out videos every single day. But hey, as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.